Today we're going to go someplace hard. And I told our guest, I'm like, I have to kind of get my heart and my brain around where we're going today because it's a hard place. And my guest is Rosie Makinney. Let me tell you what she does, and then maybe that'll give you a hint as to the hard place we're going to today. Rosie's a Lifeway author. She's an international speaker, and she's host of a podcast called Fight For Love. And she's also the head of a ministry called Fight For Love that equips women with the faith and the facts to take back their relationships from porn. Let me tell you why I'm having Rosie on today. I get more messages from women every single week on this issue than any other issue. So if porn has at all affected your life, your home, your relationships, this episode is for you. One reminder before we dig in today, group coaching is open. I already have half of my first group filled. So get in now if you want in this next session that starts the beginning of April. Go to comparedo.me and look for the coaching tab for more info. Welcome to Compared to Who, the podcast to help you make peace with your body so you can savor God's rest and feel His love. If you're tired of fighting body image the world's way, Compared to Who is the show for you. You've likely heard lots of talk about loving your body, but my goal is different. Striving to fall in love with stretch marks and cellulite is a little silly to me. Instead, I want to encourage you and remind you with the truth of Scripture that you are seen, you are known, and you are loved no matter what your size or shape. Here, the pressure is off. If you're looking for real talk, biblical encouragement, and regular reminders that God loves you and you're not alone, you've come to the right place. I hope you enjoy today's show, and hey, tell a friend about it. Rosie, thank you for being on the show today to help us tackle this.
Oh, Heather, it's my absolute pleasure to come and hopefully give your audience a bit of truth and a bit of hope.
Absolutely. And they're going to enjoy your accent because it's fabulous. And if they could see you, if they're watching the video, they could also see how awesomely coordinated you are. She has on fabulous earrings and a fabulous, is that leopard or cheetah? I'm not good with my animal.
I'm bringing my A game
identification. But yes. And she matches this like gorgeous picture in her background. It's so coordinated. So you have to go to YouTube and see if you can find the video so you can see Rosie. But hearing her is just a delight as well. And Rosie, you go to hard places like every single day with lots and lots of women. Since I met you last year, it's been like my go-to. Hey, just go to Fight For Love. Hey, just go to Fight For Love. Hey, go check out Fight For Love. They're going to have more for you than I do. Like I'm just like my funnel. I should just have like an auto reply, like go to Fight For Love. No, I wouldn't auto reply because I respond to everyone personally, but Rosie, this is hard. This is hard stuff. So let's start off. Why do you go here? Why do you do this? What's your story?
Well, it is hard, but it's harder when we don't talk about it.
That's true too.
Actually, talking about it brings so much light into this dark, dark place. And when I'm talking to women in person, and I was at a conference at the weekend, so I do my talk and then the women line up to basically vomit out their stories of pain and rejection. And they come up to me and they're just looking crestfallen and beaten down and heavy. And then we chat, and I give them some hope, and I give them resources, and I give them first baby steps that they need to take, and they go away lighter. So I'm so grateful to you, Heather, for, being brave and having this conversation, being willing to bring this information to your audience, because the hardest thing is feeling that you are alone and that there is no hope, and it's not true at all. Right. There are hundreds of thousands of women dealing with this, and now there are hundreds of women dealing with this together in an effective way, and it's exciting. It's exciting. We can actually start taking back ground.
Right. Hey, you know what? I asked you a question, but I'm going to interrupt you before you answer that question, because I think what you just said there was so important. Because when this happens, when you first find out, You first find it on his computer, you find it on his phone, or whatever, however you find out. I think the first problem you face is, who do I tell? Who can I talk to? You can't, you don't call your parents, right? You don't call your friends. You feel awkward. You can't bring it up in your church small group, right? So what do you do? Who do you tell? So I think just even being there at that, as a resource for that point is so important. But go ahead and tell us. So how did this all start for you?
I will, but if I'm just going to, piggyback on that point, because quite often half the problem about us coming forward and telling anybody is that we don't really believe that we have any right to come forward. Somehow we're overreacting. Like, although we feel absolutely devastated and shocked, the world is telling us everybody's doing this. It's no big deal. The problem is actually your problem with it.
Right.
Just get over yourself.
Yeah.
So half the battle is actually being validated that when we discover that our beloved are actually, fantasizing and arousing themselves to other people, it affects our brains in the same way as if they were having a real physical sexual encounter with somebody else. Our brains do not differentiate. Right. And so once you get that, you go, oh, that's why I'm absolutely devastated. I do have cause to bring this up, and it is something that needs to be addressed. So I just want to put that out there and say you're not overreacting.
Because it's unfair. We'll have you introduce yourself at the end of the show, Rosie. Let's just keep going. Because it's unfaithfulness, right? Like it's how our brains react. And let me tell you this, Heather, because I found this out not too long ago and it blew my mind. It was a chap who was an expert in attachment theory, and he said that when there's a rupture in our relationship with our primary attachment figure, i.e. our spouse, our brain registers that as a primal survival threat. And that makes sense. That makes total sense. So our brains are registering it as unfaithfulness. His body and brain is responding as though he was actually having sex with somebody else. So where it says in the Bible, I say to you, if you look with lust at a woman, you have committed adultery in your heart. It's like the Bible was there telling us why this is bad for us. It's because his brain's reacting as though he is being technically unfaithful, and her brain is. So, the stuff in the Bible is not there to spoil our fun. It's there to protect us. It's just like, why don't we just read it and listen to it and obey it? We stop ourselves so many problems. Wow.
So I've completely not answered your question at all, Heather.
That's okay. Okay. So, I think I can have the self-discipline to back up. Okay. Tell us how you got started, and then I'll just jump in with all my questions.
Okay. So I'll give you the shortened version. Okay. So my story is split over two parts, and actually over two relationships, one before becoming a Christian and one afterwards. So all throughout my 20s, I was trying to make my life happen the way I wanted, and I almost got there. So I was, I'd almost got my fairy tale, and I'd got my very, great job, great social life. I got a very handsome, successful, respected boyfriend, but underneath it was rotten, and it was really rotten. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I'm like, why can't we get married and finish off this fairy tale? What is it? He seems dissatisfied. He seems distant. I can't rid myself of the feeling that he's being deceptive. I don't think he's having an affair, but my spidey sense is going off as though he is. And because I wasn't a Christian yet, we were having a sexual relationship, and things were just a bit weird. I was no expert. However, I'm thinking, I don't think that's normal. I think that's dysfunction. Then when I stumble upon these accounts on his computer and the websites that he's been on, I'm like, the penny started to drop, and I started to connect the dots, and I think this is all related. So I confront him, and, unfortunately, like many, many women, I get the response of anger and, you shouldn't have been looking. Everybody does this. It's no big deal. What's your problem with it? Get over yourself. but you can't get over yourself because your brain's been traumatized and it feels like they are being unfaithful, and things get weirder and weirder. And now I don't want to do what the world tells me, which is to compete with it. And I don't want to do what I'm hearing, maybe the church says, which is you just need to have more sex with him, or you just need to be more forgiving or more graceful. Nothing is working. And the whole thing just gets worse and worse and worse. It's just the most lonely, painful, confusing, devastating experience. And nothing you do makes any difference. And everything seems to be getting worse. And it all fell apart. But then I become a Christian. So everything's going to change, isn't it? And I meet the lovely guy who's going to be my husband. And, you have that conversation, don't you, Heather? Like, what happened in your last relationship? So I tell him, and he goes a little bit quiet. And then confesses that this has been a problem for him in the past, that he sought help for it, but he needed to tell me. And so in my naivety, I'm like, well, he obviously doesn't want this. He doesn't want to be doing this. He sought help. This is not going to be a problem. So we go ahead and we get married. But very soon, like honeymoon soon, it's very apparent that the invisible enemy that I was fighting in the previous relationship was very much here with us. And it was like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? He says he loves me, and yet he's so angry and critical and resentful, and I don't measure up, and I'm not this, I'm not that. And I just had what I now know is sort of trauma reaction. I went, no, enough. I cannot do this. I cannot go round this crazy merry-go-round again, because I know how it ends. So I gave him an ultimatum. You can have me or you can have the pornography, but you can't have both. And I meant it. Even though I'd just given up everything to move to America, to my new husband, even my name, identity, everything I'd given up to be with him. I was willing to go, I don't care. I am not doing this again because I cannot put myself through that. But luckily he was ready. He was ready to get help. And so we got into recovery. So we've had a strange trajectory. Normally you start in the honeymoon period and then it might come down a bit. We started rock bottom and we had to work really hard, but we did. And we found areas of brokenness that we didn't even know need healing, both of us. And it's been a crazy journey. And then we've just wanted to go out and share with other people and pull other people out of the shadows. And that's how it all started. But my particular ministry, Fight for Love, is encouraging women to do what I did inadvertently, which was early intervention. As soon as you realize that this is an issue, instead of crisis management. But I didn't do that because I knew what I was doing, because I had great self-esteem. It's only because I'd already learned everything the hard way in the previous relationship. And I don't want women to learn things the hard way anymore.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I know this is a story. I know people are listening or watching right now and they're like, yep. Did that. Yep. I've had that experience. I've had that feeling. Like, this is so common. And I feel like for Christian men, it's interesting that you felt like, it wasn't what your husband wanted. And I feel like that's true. Not across the board, right? But I feel like there's a lot of Christian men that just feel stuck. And I think just conversations I've had with my husband, and because this is part of our story as well, he thought getting married was going to fix it. So I think there's a lot of Christian men that believe, okay, if I can just get married, do things God's way, then I'll be free and I won't struggle anymore. And I think instead what happens is the enemy comes in with that temptation, like even harder than ever before once you're married. And so there's a little bit of naivety involved for them and also for us, and I've been, you said the church's answer. I mean, I love the church, love the church, but I was at a Christian conference before I was married. And I remember from the stage, someone saying something like, you just need to put a padlock on the fridge so you can have, a better body so your husband will want to be with you. And at the time I wasn't married then. This was a conference I attended as a single, but those messages got in there. And, most of my audience is struggling with body image at some point. And so the intersection between body image issues and this, my husband's porn problem is related to the fact that I'm not hot enough. it creates all kinds of explosion. And you and I talked about this on your show. So I'm going to link that in the show notes. So go back and listen, because Rosie and I had a great conversation about body image as it particularly relates to this issue. So listen to that show. But today I'm just kind of hoping, Rosie, you can help us. Like, okay, let's start with the woman that, has just found out.
Yeah.
Can you give her some hope?
Absolutely. First of all, validate that everything that you're feeling is totally normal and totally valid. You are not overreacting. And I can't stress that enough, because it takes us so long to come out of that numbness and shock and start to take effective action. And it's at this critical point where you're either going to go one of three ways. You're either going to start to try and compete with it because you've been told that somehow you are not that you caused it, but that you are capable of controlling his temptations. Like somehow marital sex and this isolated voyeuristic experience of arousing yourself to images of other women or whatever are interchangeable, and they're totally not. It's like, one analogy that I find helpful to explain it is gambling addiction, because both pornography addiction and gambling addiction are process addictions. And we understand that if your husband was addicted to gambling, you wouldn't try and cure him by going, here you are, darling, here's a suitcase full of cash. You don't need to win it. Here it is. I've got it. They'd go, no, that's not going to do. We know that because it's about the thrill. It's about the ritual. It's about those happy chemicals that are released when you think you're going to win.
Right.
It's the excitement. And it's the same with pornography. It's not the actual act, which is why they can watch stuff that absolutely disgusts them when they come back in their right minds. It's not that. It's the chemicals that their brains are producing when they're watching it, because our bodies are responding as though they're having sex. It's how we're biologically wired. And it's why pornography is so dangerous, because it hijacks our God-given reward center that rewards behaviors that further our survival, like eating and having sex. Those are good things when they're done the right way in balance, but they can be hijacked. But pornography is not just like sexual junk food. It's actually poison, because it's affecting the way he's looking at you. And this is where, going back to your question about what do you say to that woman who's just discovered, just want to validate your instinct. This is why he has been treating you the way that he has, and how you've been having these feelings of rejection. It's not your imagination. They've done studies that proven the more pornography they consume, the more they have to be thinking about it to maintain their arousal. So this is why when we're with them, we're going, where are you? You're not here with me. It's not about this intimate emotional experience. It's just about being used, and we sense that. So I would say my hope is like, a porn-free marriage is possible, and it is possible for your husband's brain to heal, so that this pornographic lens that has somehow, infected his eye, that he is now viewing the world through, it can be taken away. He can see you again as, the beautiful creation that God created. You are uniquely and perfectly created for him, and he will be able to appreciate that, because he'll be able to see you without this pornographic lens, which is just destroying the way he looks at you, destroys the way he looks at everybody and everything, and is also making him depressed and dissatisfied and fed up and angry and critical and distant and deceptive and all those things, and also dumb. Here's the other one that blew my mind. Is there's a condition called hypofrontality, which is what you get in two ways. One is a head-on collision, and second is heavy porn use. It shrinks your brain, Heather. It shrinks the gray matter and impairs the connectivity in your prefrontal cortex, which is where we make our decisions. So even though you say to your husband, like, this is devastating me, you're going to lose your job, you're going to crash the car, you're going to lose your family, you need to stop this. Their brain is so hijacked and they're not thinking straight that they go, oh, just one more time. Just one more time, and then I'll really quit. And then something bad happens and they need to, this is their coping mechanism. It's not something that's consciously in their control for the cravings. Acting out, yes, they do have control over that, but the cravings and that strong, overwhelming, hijacking urge is now become wired into their brain, so that whenever they face something uncomfortable, that's where their brain goes. That's how I solve the pain. I'm going to go to pornography. And quite often this wiring, this hijacking started when they were teens or children.
Or younger. Yeah.
So all that can be reversed, and it's worth fighting for, but you have to know how to fight. So you're not going to compete with it. You're not going to overlook it. You're not going to jump straight to forgiveness. And I'm going to unconditionally love him and create an environment whereby he doesn't need to act out. It's like, this is a coping mechanism. Yeah. So unless you're going to remove every single stressor from his life, which isn't possible, this strategy is not going to work. You cannot fix this. You cannot control this. The only thing you can do is set a firm boundary and explain that you are now educated and equipped and supported enough to stand firm on this, and you will be.
Yeah.
So even though his brain is fighting you, and he might be verbally giving you a little bit of, what's the word, pushback, you're going to be standing firm because you know what you're talking about, and you've got sisters standing right behind you. And hopefully, and many guys do, they go, they just wave the white flag at that point and go, all right, I'll go and see that person. I'll go and see that counselor, whatever, because they know that you're serious.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think, and I don't know if this is what you've found, but I think this is true from just people I've worked with in ministry. That conversation, that white flag waving, is probably not going to happen when you confront him. That's going to be the next morning or a couple days later, because just think about human nature. None of us, when confronted, we're like, oh yeah, you're right. That's just, especially if it comes out of the blue, it's not going to happen when you confront him. So I think when, if you're listening, watching, when you hear that, if your response that you get isn't that immediately, that white flag immediately, hey, just no, that's maybe an unrealistic expectation. You got to give it a couple days.
That's a great point, Heather. That's a good reason why we recommend that you hold off on that conversation for a little while and you educate yourself in the meanwhile. Just to give you the confidence and resolve, like, what you're talking about. Don't give me that flannel. I know, that's just your crazy brain talking. Like, no, that's not true. And also the support, so that you hear all the other stories of exactly what you've talked about. Like, he gave me pushback and he gave me grief and he made me feel really. There's the thing with boundaries. If you do them and you get pushback, it's more confirmation that the boundary was needed in the first place.
Right.
And the other point I wanted to say about that was there's a huge spectrum of guys and a huge spectrum of relationships. So you've got some guys who are desperate to give this up and have been waiting for a moment like this. Like, I didn't know how to bring this
find
up.
Out. Yeah.
Like they were thinking, like, if she finds out, she's going to leave me and I can't have that. That was my worst fear. But if you come to him with, grace and truth, like, this is destroying us, it's destroying you and it's destroying me. We're going to deal with this together. This is a problem. I know you didn't mean to get your brain hijacked, and I appreciate that. And we're going to work together. But then on the other end, you've got highly abusive men. Some are even narcissistic. And so there are many resources that you may need to access if you're in a highly abusive relationship before you can even put this boundary in. And maybe, and that's why we don't try and do all the advice giving or the healing. We actually point you towards the ministries who are going to help you in your particular situation. Because I always say that learning about pornography is not going to make the situation worse. Because now you're aware that there is this venomous snake of porn slithering around your house. But the truth was, the snake was always there. However, I can't, what I can guarantee is that you getting into recovery, whether or not he comes with you, is going to change your life. And maybe your miracle is going to come in the form of strength and clarity and wisdom to remove yourself and your children to safety. Because there's no guarantee that you setting a boundary, it's going to give you your happy ending and get him online. many, many cases it does. And it's certainly worth fighting for, and doing it effectively, because many women don't. They just go straight to divorce. It's like they've been fighting this on their own for 10 years, trying to be graceful, trying to have more sex, trying to do this, that, and the other. And then they're just exhausted and done. And they're like, I'm done. And I'm saying, well,
yeah, well, I was just going to say, I have gotten, I couldn't even count how many emails from women whose husbands have told them, if you would just go get implants, if you would get a boob job, then I would want to have more sex with you. And then that would fix my porn problem. Or if you would just lose this amount of weight. I mean, like those two things, but the boob job especially. And every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, sirens going off. Okay, he's looking at porn. Do you know he's looking at porn? I'm pretty sure he's looking at porn. Have you had a conversation about porn? If he's pushing you to that, there is something behind that. And so I just, you said this a couple of minutes ago, but to reiterate, you changing your body, even if it's the way he's directing you to change your body, if he's telling you this would fix it, that's not going to fix it. So it's, and I don't know. I feel like it's really important to, emphasize, it's not about you.
No,
this is not the wife's problem, the girlfriend's problem. This is not about her. No. I mean, it is a problem for her, but it's not about her.
Here's a bit of interesting science for you that I don't normally talk about, but I think for your audience, it would be really, really helpful. And it's why internet pornography is so particularly damaging as opposed to magazines. And the reason it's damaging is something called the Coolidge effect, which is okay, let me take you back. So the way that they discovered this Coolidge effect is they took a ram and they introduced him to a sheep. So the ram mates with the sheep. Okay. And then, he might do it again. And then eventually he just gets bored and he's like, fed up. So they introduce another sheep. So the ram goes, new sheep, and gets back on with it. Another sheep. And they can keep, as long as they keep introducing new sheep, the ram will keep trying to mate with them. That didn't happen when he just had the one sheep. So what happens in our brains is that there's an off switch when we reproduce, when we have sex with our partner, is what enables us to get out of the bedroom and back on with life. So we are meant to be satisfied and be able to get back on with life. But when a new partner is introduced virtually, or whatever, like in pornography, our brains go, another partner. And the happy chemicals come again. And so when people are watching pornography, and they're not just watching one scene, there's multiple tabs up there. They're flicking back and forth, from scenario to scenario to scenario, multiple people, this, that, the other. And their brains are just being flooded with, these crazy levels of chemicals that they were never designed to. And there's no off switch. There's no off switch. So this is how people end up binging for days. And all that to say, how is one woman, no matter what your implants are like, ever going to compete with the fact that there is an endless supply of novel women for your brain to get high on? It's just not possible. And even porn stars, porn performers, shall I call them, have come forward and said, I cannot keep my partner from watching pornography. Like, these are the women who actually look like the women in pornography and do what the women in pornography can do. And even they can't keep interest. So it's really not about you at all. And actually, do you want him to be viewing you through that pornographic lens? Or do you want to be wanted and desired for you?
Right. Which I think that's an underlying issue for a lot of us that struggle with body image issues, is objectifying ourselves. And when we objectify ourselves and then compare ourselves to these women that have set themselves up to be objectified, or, chosen that career path, let's put it that way.
Or I don't think they've chosen, to be honest.
True. I mean, that's true too. It's
they're
hard.
most vulnerable.
They're exploited. They're
exploited.
And so, but when we objectify ourselves and then compare ourselves to women who are objectified, it dehumanizes us, right? And then what we're looking for from a partner is that kind of objectification response. And our partners are like, what? Like, I know you, like, I can't hopefully a healthy partner is not trying to objectify you anymore. And yet we're like, but wait, why aren't you like drooling and gaping as I'm, so it's an interesting interesting dynamic, I think, for those of us who really struggle with body image issues, because there's a little part of us that wants that, and it's yicky, but we kind of want it. So yeah, but porn's not really about porn.
No.
What's it about?
Porn is, it's not the problem. It's the solution to this deeper underlying problem, which is an intimacy disorder. As I mentioned before, it's a coping mechanism. It's become like their emotional pacifier. So whenever they're dealing with anything, they go, oh, I know what can make me happy, or I can take it, not even make me happy, but take the pain away. Right. So it's how I cope. So you cannot expect them to just give it up because you say so, because it upsets me, because it is their coping mechanism. They actually have to learn to replace it with something healthy, which is true, authentic, intimate relationships with other guys, where they actually reveal who they are and reveal everything they've done, past, present, going forward. But also not just, I looked at this site, but actually I was resentful, about my wife. I really hate my children right now. I want to kill my boss. You have to get to the root of everything that's driving these horrible, shameful feelings that you don't know what to do with, and get it out in the open and have other people go, yep, I hear you. I totally understand. I still love you. We're here for you. Thanks for sharing. And that takes away a lot of the energy and the sting, and enables you to make healthy decisions. Like, I know my brain is screaming, like, let's look at porn. This is going to take away the pain. But now I feel like I have the strength, because I've just talked to people and I've just confessed what's really going on, and I'm walking in the light. And now I have the strength to actually turn away and turn off. And it's beautiful, because it's that biblical principle of 1 John 1:7, walk in the light as he is in the light, and then you have fellowship. You have to walk in the light. And by walking in the light, that becomes your coping mechanism. Just revealing who you really are and being loved for who you really are takes the pain, away, in a way that you don't need to rely on these artificial, destructive substitutes.
Right.
So really, women who, totally understandable, no judgment, are like, well, I'm going to get a boob job because that will make him love me. I totally understand where that's coming from, but actually it's kind of getting in the way of actually him healing. Dare I use the word enabling? But it is, because if you really do want the best for him, you have to understand that he is in bondage to this highly destructive coping mechanism, and he needs your boundaries to get out, because in marriage two become one, and you are now the thinking part of his brain, because his is no longer working. And you have to make the healthy decision, like, we need help. I know you've tried a million times to give this up and it's not working. So what we now need to do is get you to walk in the light. And I need to walk in the light, and I need to tell you exactly how this has been affecting me, how it's affected my sexual identity, how it's affected many, many things in my life. Things like physical symptoms, insomnia, gastrointestinal, all these other things that suddenly, when the porn starts being taken care of, we go, oh my goodness, I really have been traumatized for years and years and years trying to fix this. So no to the boob job, yes to the boundaries.
Thank you for listening to this episode that is part of the Spark Media Network that can now be heard on the Edify app.
Would like to kind of jump in, and we haven't actually had a conversation about what you all recommend as a ministry, or what you would recommend, but I do like to tell women it's not possible to be his personal Holy Spirit. So boundaries, you set your boundaries, and then also I think boundaries in terms of what you have on screens, like all of that's very important. But I remember early in our struggle with this, I was like, I didn't want to leave the house because then I could make sure, or like I didn't want to go away for the weekend because, that's an opportunity. And I thought by just making sure that he couldn't access it, then that would fix it. But that wasn't the problem. As you've explained, the problem's deeper than that. So I just kind of want to put that out there. Like, don't mistake boundaries for, and that you're the thinking part of his brain for, okay, now I just need to follow him around.
No, really good point. Really good point. And I'm glad you raised that, because your job is not to fix him or try and control him. Your job is to get him to someone who can. Yeah. So that is your role. You are the catalyst in this relationship who's saying, I'm no longer going to ignore this issue. The boundaries are, I am no longer ignoring this issue or enabling it. We are going to deal with this, and we need help. We need outside help. We need to walk in the light about this. And if you are unwilling or unable to do that, I'm going to do it for myself. And you can get into recovery on your own, and you will find clarity, wisdom, healing, incredible relationships with other women, and your life can change. I cannot guarantee which way your marriage is going to go. I'm hoping and I'm praying that it will be restored and not even restored, but totally transformed, because you don't just get your old marriage back minus the pornography. I mean, who wants that anyway? It's pretty dysfunctional. You know, we weren't really authentic. We weren't really sharing. Because you're both forced to walk in the light and you learn those recovery skills, you get a really incredible marriage that you always wanted.
Amen.
And it's beautiful. And then when you're healed and his brain is drained from, the crazy chemicals, and he's become more sober from sex, and his ability to be aroused by you, a real person that he really does love, your sex life is going to be totally different and so much better. And playful. Who could ever dream that your sex life could be playful after all the rubbish and pain and hurt and trauma that's gone on in there? But I'm telling you, it is possible.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And my brain's going a couple different directions. Okay, let me go this one first. I've had some women, young women, who were dating a boy and they found out about pornography, or engaged to someone and found out about pornography. And I haven't really known how to respond to them perfectly, because in a way it's like, don't break up with him thinking that the next guy you date is not going to have this problem necessarily. Okay. So see what you can do with the one you're with. But no, it's going to be a big issue. It's not going to be fixed when you get married. What do you say? Do you say straight up, hey, don't take that relationship any further until you fix the porn problem? Or how would you respond to that?
No, that's a really good question, because, and I've seen a lot of people when this issue comes up on, social media, they're going, run away. And just like you said, it's like, not sure how that strategy is going to play out, with our current statistics. Yeah. And the fact that you would be lucky if you weren't dealing with this problem on some level. I'd say you found out about it. That's a win. Okay. You now have a firm foundation. It's a problem. You don't have to wait 10, 20 years into marriage to suddenly realize you're not going to be blindsided. 2, take it seriously. 3, educate yourself, read the book, listen to the podcasts. Yes, it is really sad that we have to deal with this before we get married, but that's the reality of living in this fallen world at the moment. But you are in such a strong position. You have, if we're talking about bargaining power, you have it all at this point. Your boundaries are really effective. And if he wants to marry you, then he's going to have to get some solid recovery under his belt. And there are ministries out there. There's one amazing one called Husband Material, and they deal with this demographic. And the whole thing is, let's get this issue, under control and sorted, so that you can both walk down the aisle truly knowing who the other person is, with the skills that are going to set you up for an incredible marriage. Because let's face it, you're going to have to learn these skills in marriage anyway. Right. There's no way around it. There's good, if anybody throws you a party, like a bridal shower or a baby shower, okay, red flags. It's going to be hard work. That's my motto for life. If anybody starts throwing gifts at you, it's like, okay, you're going to have some work to do, because people are trying to soften this blow.
That's so funny.
So if you can do this work before getting married, not just, we'll go to premarital, it'll be fine. It'll be like, no. You need to call in the big guns and get some professionals to help him sort out his lack of a healthy coping mechanism. But also you're going to need to be strengthened and supported to know what is the healthy boundaries, and be you are going to have to be strengthened with your self-esteem, so that you're not going to go down those routes of, well, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I forgive, maybe if I'm more graceful. You have to be really, really clear on what is the effective way to hold the line on this, on this issue. So I sort of, it is heartbreaking. And we have many, many women in our support group who are dating, but on some level I'm rejoicing, because I'm like, either you're going to, now you understand what you're dealing with, either you're going to sort this out before you walk down the aisle, or it's going to end and you're not going to walk down the aisle and get blindsided by this in the future. So it's kind of a win-win if you find out beforehand. But it does, we all want the Cinderella ending.
Right. Well, and as you were talking about Cinderella, like a lot of the women I coach, when this has been an issue as part of everything, talk about just the reality of having to grieve. Because I think most of us assume when we get married, when we found the one, that he's going to think we are just, it's Cinderella, right? He's going to think we are the fairy princess. And, if I look good enough, he'd never be tempted to look elsewhere. And, we're looking for the happy ending. And boy, the discovery of porn sure does rip that dream away. Yeah. And so kind of stopping, and I'm not sure, what exactly you'd recommend in this, but stopping to grieve, like stopping to allow yourself to go through those 5 stages of grief, to be angry, just to feel it, right? To not numb yourself, but to feel it and process it as a loss. It's a death of your dream marriage. It doesn't mean, like you said, that you can't, that God can't restore that, right? God's in the business of raising the dead to life. So he has the power to resurrect it, but it's okay to grieve the death. I know that Mary and Martha were crying when Lazarus was dead. So it's okay for you to grieve.
And that's so important, because it's easy to listen to our message of like, you got to fight for it and think that you can just shelve all those negative emotions, and you can't. And that's why the recovery program for women, as recommended by APSATS, which is the Association of Partners of Sex Addict Trauma Specialists, who I recommend if you're looking for a therapist, look for someone who's trained through APSATS. Okay. They have 3 stages. One is safety. So getting yourself to safety, recognizing what's going on. And the second one is remembering and mourning. It's a really important stage. And the third one is rebuilding. But as we were talking about Cinderella, because I thought about this, because I really wanted Cinderella, and then I thought, now we've turned into Beauty and the Beast, and I've married a beast. Right. But in my mind, I'm still Belle. I'm still singing to small animals. And he's the one with all the problems.
Right. But I love where you're going to go. I think I love where you're going to go. Go ahead.
But then I realized that actually I'm not in those films at all. I'm in Shrek, and he's an ogre, but actually I'm an ogre as well. And that is marriage, is it not?
Right. Oh, it's so true. And I mean, I think, porn use is big for women and men now. So I don't want to say this in a way that would make any women that are struggling with this issue feel strange, but this was my experience. I felt like, because I was the one who didn't use porn, that I was the more righteous one, and he had all the problems. And when we went to counseling, I was excited for him to get fixed all of his problems, because I didn't have any problems. And my self-righteousness was not helping our marriage any more than his issues were. Right. And so for me, this might be completely frivolous, and you can tell me if it's just a really bad idea. But for me, what I've had to do at certain times is, the porn thing was, praise God, like we got help, and he wanted help. He really thought that marriage was going to fix it. And my husband wasn't a Christian until he was 27 years old, and he was a Marine. I naively thought that someone who was not saved until they were 27, a Marine, could somehow have avoided ever being in that world. And I was wrong. But, praise God, like he's done an amazing restorative and resurrection work for us. And we've been porn free for probably 12-ish years now. There's been other things where it's like, when it just stop, like, I don't understand, like, why you have to do that. And so when I'm talking to women about porn, I feel like it relates, like having compassion. I mean, yes, boundaries, all the things, right? It's never okay. But in order to find a place to have compassion and to give him grace in terms of approaching it with truth, right? I use the example of how I feel on those days when I just keep going back for another handful of M&Ms or cookies. It's a compulsion, right? Like, and I can tell myself I shouldn't do that. I know it's not good for me to go back and grab another handful of the kids, candy. Like, I know I shouldn't do that, but I do it anyway. And then I'm kind of sit there like, I shouldn't have done that. I kind of want more. And I go back and I get more. And there are times when I'm not completely in control of all of that, right? Like, there's some moments where it's like, why did I do all that? Right. So it's very much like a binge. And so kind of being able to process it through the filter of, no, I'm not perfect either. God's still got a lot of things he's got to work on me. And, and my sanctification is not complete. And I don't know. I just feel like
it is true. And it really helps you have compassion and make that switch from sort of adversaries to allies. It doesn't take away the fact of what he's done to you. It doesn't invalidate or negate the pain and the trauma that he's caused you, that you were in no way responsible for. Your brokenness did not in any way cause him to do that to you or for his behavior. However, when you do sort of acknowledge that actually I am Fiona and I've got my own stuff, it does help you. It just helps you have compassion. It doesn't take away all the pain. It just helps you look at it from a slightly different angle. And quite often for me anyway, the inability to do boundaries and stuff was a big part of why I just walked past a load of red flags. And some women get totally blindsided and they have no idea this is going on, and they don't have issues in that respect, but some do. So it was an opportunity for me when we got into recovery to start to unpack some of the stuff. Because I do remember in those early days of early recovery, I caught myself fantasizing about how the next relationship was going to take away the pain of this one. And at which point I thought, okay, I have a problem here because I have been hopping out of relationships into, frying pan fire. Now I'm in a Bunsen burner, big furnace type. I'm just jumping from one to the next. And now I'm imagining that the next one is going to fix it. Now I understand that a lot of that was, unprocessed trauma and stuff. But it did help me start to have compassion and realize that I can fight alongside him. We can fight this thing together. He's not the problem. I'm not the problem. The problem is the pornography. And that's what I'm not trying to get over it in my marriage. I'm trying to get it out of my marriage. And hopefully he can fight alongside me. Maybe not at the beginning. Maybe he's going to be resistant, but I am going to fight. And that means walking in the light. So it is confusing. And that, as you say, there's lots of mixed emotions, and, you can be angry and hate your husband and yet love him.
Right. Be on his team. You can be mad at him, but be on his team for this fight against a common enemy. The enemy's not your husband. I think that's a really good reminder. Yeah.
And also it can be confusing, right? He's doing these things for you. And there are so many messages. Like some people are like, leave him. Some people are like, stay and put up with it forever. And you're going to be experiencing all these emotions. And that's why it's really good to get yourself in a support group of other women who get it, who are experiencing, these bad things that are happening to you. And yet they can't stop loving him. And I just really recommend that the best way to get clarity and sanity is not to go to the person whose brain has been hijacked and is insane, but actually to go to those sources of help who have experienced this and know what they're talking about first. And then you can go back sort of when you're confident and supported and encouraged, braced from maybe a little bit of a battle as you get him to the therapist's office.
Yeah. Well, and then just, kind of to what you were saying earlier, tuning out all of those voices of culture and maybe even people in your life that would tell you it's just normal. Like, what are you making such a big deal over it for? Everyone watches porn. Like, seriously, like grow up, like, or I don't know, loosen up or whatever.
Totally.
And not knowing that those voices, that's not good advice either. So good. Yeah. Okay. Well, any last thoughts, hope, encouragement? I mean, I could probably talk to you for another hour on this, but
I would say, we've hit you with an awful lot of information and it is overwhelming, but if you can remember, you are not alone and there is hope. And a first baby step would be, go and check out Heather on our podcast and you can see how we do things over there. And there you will hear stories from many, many women who have walked this path or who are actually walking this path. And I have, I interview women who are doing this in real time and, nothing speaks to you like, other women actually sharing what's really going on. And then you don't feel so alone or so crazy.
Right. And tell us the website. I'll have it all in the show notes, but just in case someone's just driving and wants to hop over there now.
The website is fightforloveministries.com and the podcast is Fight For Love. And the book, which is sort of like an idiot's guide to porn addiction or women who are dealing with this, is called Fight For Love.
Fight For Love. You're just like me, keeping all the branding consistent. I love it. So go to Fight For Love. Or, it's an awkward thing to share. Like Rosie, we have similar, I think social media issues, right? Because people aren't going to like, yeah, this really helped me and my husband and our porn issues. Like most people aren't going to do that, right? They should, but they're probably not. But, put it out there wherever you can, especially if you're a leader in a church. Like Rosie's got great stuff for women in your church that need it. So add this to your list of resources or grab the book and keep it in your resource library. Like these are resources that women need and may not necessarily find without some help. So that's just my encouragement to you. If this isn't for you personally, it's for someone in your life right now. So pass it on. Rosie, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Heather. It's always wonderful to chat to you.
Hey friends, if something in today's episode struck you, I really hope you'll connect with Rosie's ministry, Fight For Love. And in the show notes, you'll also find out information on Covenant Eyes, which is an accountability software that we use in our home. We have it on every single device, computers, iPads. We have it on the phone. You need to check out Covenant Eyes if you don't have any accountability software in your home. This is something you need ASAP. So check out the link for that in the show notes. And hey, if this show is blessing you, there is nothing kinder you can do for me than to leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. I would so greatly appreciate that. And don't forget, group coaching is open, so go grab your spot now. As always, I hope something in today's episode has helped you stop comparing and start living. Bye-bye.